Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast, Be Sunder. I'm your host, Moha, and I'm here with Gabriela today. And thank you for being here.
No, my pleasure.
And would you uh, introduce yourself to
Yeah.
us a little bit?
So I'm Gabriella. I am half English and half Italian. I was born and raised in the UK, and then I left when I finished my studies. So when I was in my early 20s, and then I moved to Italy. And I lived in Italy between 1987 and 2012, I guess.
Where did you live in Italy exactly?
So I initially moved to Genova because at the time my grandfather was still alive. My mum was from Genova. So I went to Genova hoping that I could find some kind of work, but there was nothing. So then I moved to Milan.
Okay.
I lived in Milan for 2 years, and then I moved to Bergamo, which is kind of northeast of Milan, and I lived in Bergamo for about 20 years. And I worked in IT
Yes.
during all that time. And then I moved to France in 2012 with my partner and my 2 children, and I've been here ever since. And in 2019, I had a career change. The company I was working for closed its operations in Europe, which meant I lost my job, which was a blessing in disguise, because then I did a course which is called TEFL, which is Teaching English as a Foreign Language. And I did that during the lockdown. So I was kept busy. And then I started teaching English, and that's why I'm here.
Fantastic. Do you like your cup? You can.
I haven't
actually,
looked at my cup,
it has something.
Do what you love. Oh, okay. That's appropriate. So I love it 95% of the time. There are sometimes when I
95%.
don't love it. But
What is it about? What is about it like you don't love it exactly?
I think it is actually just the people that you work with. But I've been lucky enough to be able to put those situations behind me. My first experience was working with some adolescents, and it was very unpleasant. So I managed to just do that for a year and then move on. My second unpleasant experience lasted 2 years, working with young adults who were not really my thing for various reasons. So I managed to put that behind me as well. Okay. And now I've honed it down to being able to work with people that I enjoy being with, because for me, it's not just, talking about grammar and that, because I kind of assume that when you get to a certain age, when you finish your lycée and whatever, everything that's to do with grammar and the boring stuff, let's say, has been done. And so I try to do things that are more about conversation, about, getting people to think a bit, but all in English, of course. So
what do you mean think a bit? Like you have projects?
No.
You put out a question or something like that?
Yeah,
that
put out a question, try and discuss something which could be relative to their studies, anything that makes them talk about something related to their studies, of course. Because if I start talking about something that is not related to their studies, then they're not going to have an opinion on it. But I try to get people to, have discussions and to talk about things that interest them, because getting somebody to talk about something that they're not interested in their own language is hard enough, but in a foreign language, it's like even more hard. So.
You choose to question their studies, and you think that is an area of interest for them, and then
well, when you get to further education, like yourself, you should be doing it because it's something that you enjoy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is one of the problems that I'd faced with one of the schools I was working in, which is why I stopped going there. The students were there because they didn't have anything better to do, and so they had no purpose, they had no motivation. They were there just because they had to get a piece of paper at the end of their course. And so they were not interested in the subjects that they were studying. They were even less interested in studying it in English. And so it was just a battle, constant battle all the time. So other people that I work with, like, students from here and another school that I work in, the studies that they do is because it's something that they enjoy and that they can envisage doing as a career. So they're more engaged. They have an opinion about things. They have something to say. And it's also a two-way process, because I always say that when I'm working with people, I give them some of my knowledge, but I get a lot of knowledge back as well, because obviously we're a very different generation. I'm a 60s child. Most people that I work with were born after 2000. So we have a different approach to things. We have a different language. We have different knowledge. And so to me it's an exchange. I learn from them as much as they learn from me. And they see things differently, and also they study subjects that I don't understand. Design, I don't know anything about design. So, and the other school I work in is in cinema studies, so I don't know anything about sound design, about being a director, about being an editor of films, about all that kind of stuff is completely new to me. So they teach me about their world, but I teach them how to say it in English, kind of thing.
That is super fascinating, because I have been thinking about this a lot, this notion of like teaching and the notion of learning. Because I come from a background that teachers are not really going toward this type of direction, that you teach and you learn at the same time, like this two-way street, but rather than like seeing it as a authority, like seeing themselves as authority, basically, as a teacher. And how is it that like I find myself like always asking the question that like, how is it as a teacher we can approach the students in a way that learning continues, if you know what I mean? Like, it's not always like you're putting something out there, but rather than it's a mutual respect, in a sense. Not mutual respect as as
mutual exchange.
Yeah, mutual exchange, exactly. How is it that as a teacher you can approach this? Like what kind of mindset, what kind of state you need to be in to actually, is the question
I understand,
clear?
Yeah. So I think there is two things. Firstly is that when you're still in like mainstream education, so you've got in France there's maternelle and primaire and the whole thing. You are told what you have to do by some authority, which is way above your head. This is the curriculum, this is what you have to do, this is what you have to teach the children. And so you kind of like impose knowledge onto these students who may or may not be interested, may or may not relate to whatever it is you're teaching them. I was talking to my daughter the other day, who's 15, and she was saying, we're studying Shakespeare in French. And I'm thinking, well, Shakespeare in English is hard, but translated into French, I mean, I don't understand what the relevance of it is. Wouldn't it be better to study something that is more modern literature, something that, mangas, a lot of students, a lot of kids that age enjoy, mangas. Wouldn't it be better to read a manga, which is in French or in English or whatever, something that they can actually have an interest in?
Yeah.
But, school curriculums, like in, I think, pretty much most parts of the world, they are set by the authorities that say that students have to learn this, and this, and there's no question about it. So you're just like throwing information at them. There's also the fact that in mainstream school, classes are huge. If you go to a lycée, there's like 35 students in a class and you have them for an hour. There's not a lot of exchange that can take place when you have that size of a class. Your teacher just tells you stuff and you write it down. You can't have a debate easily in whichever language it is. When you get to like beyond your mandatory education and you go to further studies, depending on the school, like in my case, for example, here I can do whatever I like. It's up to me to decide what goes into my class. And that leaves me the freedom to get a feedback from my students of what they're interested in, what they need. And maybe something they might say in one class, I think, oh, that could be an interesting thing for the next time that we have a class together, because they've mentioned something. So that freedom to react to what my students say to me makes it so that it's not set in stone what I do. And to go to another part of your question, the thing is to listen. Yeah. And there's so many people, not just in teaching, but in all walks of life, that just don't sit and listen to what the person in front of them is saying. They hear what they're saying, but they don't listen.
That's a different thing, no?
It's absolutely totally different thing, because I can hear what you're saying, but I'm also thinking, oh, I've got something that I want to say. So I'm just like waiting for you to finish your sentence so that I can say my thing, and I'm not actually reacting to what you say. I'm just hearing it and then saying something else. And not just in teaching, but in so many different walks of life, even friendships, relationships, that happens, that you hear, but you don't listen. You don't even wait for the person to finish their sentence, because you're just like, blah, 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 to say my thing already. And so I don't have a lot of experience of working in higher education, but the schools that I work in that I'm happy with are ones where I have the freedom to do what I think is useful and what students tell me they need from me. If they say to me, oh, we need to do some grammar, it's like, okay, we'll do some grammar. If they say, oh no, we want to talk about, I don't know, social media or whatever. It's like, okay, fine, we'll talk about social media. So it's that really,
That form of a freedom, or like your openness to what could be done in the moment, basically.
Yeah,
right? Learn, as I said, like I feel like this learning always has to be there. Mm-hmm. Like as soon as you walk into the class, for example, you learn from the students. Like it's not about like even what they said maybe last time, but like you kind of feel it. You kind of like, there's this sense of like understanding that even if the students are ready to talk about, I don't know, something deeper than what it is, or something maybe more like casual, something more fun to do, right? I feel like you can read that as a teacher, as you said, like listen, of course, and at the same time, like you have this sense of understanding, which leads to learning. I feel. Is that
absolutely, yeah. It's listening, but it's also just observation as well, of like we've spoken about before, the importance of body language. If even when when you go into a classroom, everybody always tries to sit at the very back. The further away they are from you, the better it is.
They feel more comfortable.
They feel, for whatever reason, they feel more comfortable, and they sit right at the very end. And why? Why do some people do that? It's not just your verbal communication, like we've spoken about before. A lot of it is what is not said. Your body language, your posture, if you've got a hoodie and you're covering yourself. There's so many different things that you can pick up on without even being an expert in reading body language or an expert in psychology of people. You can pick on a lot of different things just by sitting in a room with people, even if they don't say anything,
That's true.
Yeah, so many different things. And so it's a form of listening, really, but it's more observation.
Of course, I feel like it's both at the same time. It could be observation, it could be listening, it could be... I think all the senses could help you to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
It like helps you to learn, basically. Yeah. Not in a sense that like you have this preconceived idea about something, but as soon as you come into that space, you start like learning with each movement that is going on in that moment, that leads to understanding, like deeply understanding what's going on, not intellectually understanding, which is usually like with our verbal communication most of the time, as you said, like you say you listen to you, but you hear something goes on like in
Yeah.
your mind. You know, it's something there, but it's not really a really deep understanding. And it brings me to this question of like communication. What is the right communication? Is that a too vague question? How could we, as a human being, for instance, like you have with this experience that you have at the moment, with this approach to teaching and approach to education, how could we, as human beings, have better communications?
You have to listen to people.
Sure.
Which is, as I said earlier, I think it's something that so few people do. I mean, I don't know whether you've had experience with this, but I have people that I'm very good friends with as well, who are just the worst listeners ever. You know, I can be talking about something and I can tell that they're just waiting to say something that they've got in their head, which is nothing related to what I've been saying. So you know that they're actually not listening to you. And I think it's, that is one big problem that we have, you know, lack of the ability to listen, a lack of concentration as well on what other people are saying, you know, because we're stimulated by so many different things going on around us, and you know, and nowadays it's got even worse with, you know, mobile phones and your notifications was pinging and, you know, all that other kind of stuff. And I think it really is a case of listening and also just, you know, being aware of what that person is telling you using non-verbal communication, because I think we've spoken about this before, but I've used a video a few times in classes. I used it here once as well, of a guy who is a retired FBI agent, and he is trained in finding spies. And he talks about all these different forms of non-verbal communication that have helped him in his job. And he says some of the most obvious things, like this kind of thing, you know, people think, oh, that's because I've got something to hide. He says, but it's not actually. It's a form of self-comfort.
Reassurance.
Yeah. And one thing that he said that was really interesting is that we're always communicating something about ourselves, even though you don't realize you're doing it, you know, just by looking at somebody in the eye, by not looking at somebody in the eyes. We're always saying something about ourselves.
But there is this, I know when you say listening, there is this like, back of my mind is like, oh, you know, it brings me to this history or this memory of like teachers, like my teachers in school, like, hey, listen, you know, like, hey, pay attention. Like, you're kind of like off because you're listening, or like you're in a class of something, a teacher is teaching you something that is not as interesting that it should be, or like, I don't know, something is missing that you cannot really pay attention. And when you say listen, I become this person who tries to listen, and as soon as it becomes a trying, it becomes like an effort to listen to. Like the energy just divides. I don't know if that's clear.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Because listening has all of the energy that is there has to go to listening, not some part of it to effort of listening. Because that's also like, you have to keep yourself like, you know, straight and tense to actually listen to something or pay attention to something. But my like, how could we listen? Like, you know, I know that could be one of the notions of like better communication between us. But how could we really listen?
I think, well, going back to your example of school, I once again thinking of my daughters who are, you know, in school system or just come out of it. I think one of the problems is that you tend to actively listen and absorb what has been told you if that thing is of interest to you. If you can see a purpose for learning that thing, yeah, or an objective, you know. if you you want to be a scientist, then you're going to pay attention in science lessons because you think, oh, that's going to be useful to me in my future for my studies, for my work, or whatever. But if you want to be an actor, or something that's more creative, your science lessons might not be of great interest to you. So the thing is with education, as in, your standard mandatory education in whichever part of the world you're in, a lot of what you're told a lot of what you're taught and that you have to listen to, you can't see a relevance for it. You can't see why it's useful to you. So you kind of like switch off because it's like, apart from, sitting my exam at the end of the year and getting a grade, I don't see how it can be useful to me. It's like going back to the example of, a 16-year-old French girl in 2025 learning about Hamlet. It's like, what is the relevance of that? Why is it useful? So I think this is, but I don't know whether there's a way around that in your education systems, because there's a curriculum to follow, and in any country it takes a very long time for a curriculum to change and to get updated to whatever is relevant nowadays. And I think that's the beauty of further education, that it can be more easily adapted to the current situation and to market needs. Because if you go to a business school, you're going to learn about things that are relevant nowadays. So it's useful to the people who are sitting in the class, and they will be more attentive. They will listen better because they know that they need that for completing their studies and for their future job. It's if somebody was to speak to me about a subject that I don't understand or that I'm not interested in, I'm not going to listen. And it's the same with you, unless you have for some kind of curiosity for that subject, just for general knowledge. But in general, if we're people talking about something that you don't understand, that's not part of your culture, that's something that's not relevant to your life, you're not really going to pay attention and listen, I think, anyway.
But there is one thing that it just boggles my mind here. Is it like, so what do we do then? Like, of course, as you say, we have these differences. We have this, like, okay, for example, I am interested in this. My classmate is not interested in that. So, like, he doesn't listen to, or he tries to distract himself. And during the distraction, he might actually distract me as well.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So, like, how do we create an environment, an education system that would not necessarily I don't know how to put it into words, but not necessarily focus on curriculum or like teaching areas, but focus on how to get the attention of children or like the students, in a sense that we are all in one area, like one area of the mind, let's say, that we can stay in that area and learn. Not of course, like, there are so many stuff during our lives that is not interesting, right?
Most of it.
We have done, yes, we have done this boot camp actually recently. I told you about it, about trash, and we have a problem with people, like, getting people to sort their trash, right? It's something that it doesn't interest people, right? But it's important as eating food, maybe not as eating food, but like it's important because it's eventually like gonna affect your food. You know what I mean? Because we're gonna landfill, we're gonna incinerate the trash, and this is just gonna come to you eventually, right? How am I, as somebody who is trying to design an education system, right, to show that, of course, it's not interesting. let's say, in a sense of like pleasurable, like as you watch a movie or something like that. But it's necessary. It's important. It requires your attention because it's interdependency that you have with your environment. You see what I mean? Because like it's not always about like what you like to do or what you want. I'm not talking about like this type of this today word like trying to tell you to be disciplined or doing that or doing that. Like no, but I'm talking about like this sense of understanding that like if it's not this interdependency, we're not gonna be happy ourselves. Like ourselves are not gonna be happy. The security that we think that we create with that comfort, with that energy of like putting out of the mind like this something that is going on that is not really interesting. That security that we're creating, it's not really security. That actually leads to insecurity.
Yeah.
If it makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
So how is it? Like, is there something we can do, you think?
I don't know. I think, I mean, I've been out of sort of like, apart from via my daughters, I've been out of, mandatory education for a long, long time now. Personally, I think my very, very personal opinion, but I know I did my education from 1970 to almost the end of the 80s. And my opinion is that school, as in school, whether it's primary school, whether it's middle school, whether it's high school, the purpose of school is to teach you a bit of everything, to give you a wide spectrum of knowledge about things that cover a broad range of subjects, from maths to science to humanities kind of subjects, to geography, to history, to language. For me, school is a place where you go to learn things that will create a foundation in you. Yeah, because you have some notions of history, some notions of maths, some notions of whatever it is, without becoming an expert in any of those particular subjects. Then as you progress, you go through, in France, it's going to be, you go to lycée, and then you maybe carry on your studies. Then you become more aware of what you want to do, what kind of direction you're going to take, whether it's going to be more artistic, whether it's going to be more scientific. And then you can sort of like concentrate your energies on that kind of thing. And the further you go through education, the more you refine your choices. But you still got that basic block of knowledge that you learned at school, which maybe 90% of it is not relevant to whatever it is you decide to do in the future, but it's still there. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I think you can't tailor school or learning at such an early age. Firstly, because you preclude, if you were to start tailoring what subjects children do in primary school when they're like 6 years old, and you say, oh well, you're going to go scientific, it's too young, and you preclude them from so many other things because you've put them on a particular path, and you've put in a second place other kind of subjects, which could be if your child goes to more scientific, then you're going to put more literary subjects in second place. And also the fact that when children are so young, who makes those choices is not the child, it's going to be the parent.
Yes.
So, parents, I want my son to be a doctor, so I'm going to make him do sciences, but, he's 6, he's 7. You can't do that. Yeah. That has to be something that the child understands as he grows up, whatever he wants to be. So I don't think there is really a one-size-fits-all solution, but because I think that because I grew up with that idea, the school is there to teach you a bit of everything without going into any particular detail about one subject, and until you get a bit older and you make that decision yourself. You see what I mean?
Yes. I see why we are doing this. I mean, the logic behind it, but I don't think it's is the optimal way to do it. I feel like you're missing this like very important aspect of education, which, as you said, it's learning, and it's always two ways. Because our education system always goes one way.
Mm-hmm.
It's always teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like, it's just always you as a authority
Mm-hmm.
who plan the education system.
Mm-hmm.
You dictate what's gonna be there
Mm-hmm.
for students.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are lacking that sense of respect for our not respect, but respect next to responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
We think that we need to control, we need to like discipline kids and children in order for them to grow up to be something or to be someone. And then in that matter of control, they lose themselves. Because as we talked before the podcast started, there's this sense of I have to do something, or like somebody pushing me to do something in life. Like some it doesn't have to be next to you. It always, like, there is this voice back of your in your head that, like, you have to be someone. You have to do something. You have to always move to do, it has to be this activity, continuous activity, right? And I feel like this push comes from our education system. And as soon as a child, as soon as a person finishes that area, which is a constant 12, 13 years, right?
If not more.
If it's not more.
Yeah. Well, in France, it's from 3 to...
Maternelle as well as like...
I think maternelle is
obligatory, no?
Mandatory. Yeah, it is mandatory. So from 3 to 17, 18.
Oh, wow.
17, 18. Because unless you finish school in college, which I don't think anybody does. But yeah, if you finish lycée, then you're 17, 18.
So, as I mentioned before, I feel like that sense of understanding, that sense of listening, that sense of learning, it lacks in our system. It lacks teacher toward students, student toward teacher as well. No doubt about that, and teacher to teacher itself, and student to its student itself, because there's so much noise going on. There's so much, like, you have to do this, you have to do that, this has to be this has to be that. Like, there's always like this thing that you like a way, like teaching you that this is the only way, it's like there's no freedom in order to really discover what's really has to be there. And as soon as the child, or like the person grows up and he becomes, I don't know, somebody, and they have like a week off, let's say, they're lost. They're like, oh, there's this like tension in their body, like, I have to do something, I have to move, something has to be done. They cannot stand. They cannot just sit for a second.
That's very true.
Yeah. So, like,
that's true.
And then when there's no that sitting for a second, that causes like this confusion that there's a life outside of me all the time, but we don't really understand that there's something inside as well.
Yep.
Like, we don't really discover what's inside as well. But and the irony of this education system is like pushing you outside, pushing for something always exterior, But the funny thing, the irony is like the thing that you're really looking for, the somebody that you want to be, doesn't really come from outside. You have to discover what's inside to see what you can do.
Oh yeah.
Like your abilities, like your passions, right? It doesn't come from like a teacher telling you that you have a passion for this, right? It has to be discovered.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes it very much depends on the teacher that you have that can convey information in a way which is interesting or not, and some people will say, oh, I was inspired by my teacher who was my history teacher, and it made me really love history, the way that the person taught history or explained it to me. There are so many different ways of approaching a subject as well, whether it's maths, whether it's history, geography, whatever. There's so many different ways of doing it. And the thing is, going back to a little bit what you were saying about this, just being at school and just having this information thrown at you. The problem I don't know whether it's the same in Iran but the problem is in most schools is that the classes are huge. You've got 35 kids in a class and you have an hour with them. So there's not a lot of debate that can go on. You don't have time to listen to everybody's opinion. So, at best you could probably get each person to talk for 2 minutes and not even, because so that eliminates any possibility of there being some kind of exchange, firstly. And the second thing is that a lot of education systems, especially in France, it's definitely this way, are based on results. They have endless evaluation. And the big thing is, what's your moyenne, your average, and what's the moyenne of the class, and what's the moyenne of the whole year. And that's how they measure you. It's your grade. And they go, there's this big stigma about whatever your average is. But you have an average for each subject. You have an overall average. And there are so many statistics that give you, say, oh, you're really good or you're not very good. It's all about how good you are at doing a test, basically, And because that is the only way that a school will have to be able to have some kind of opinion about you. I mean, where my daughter's at school here in Kenya, there are 19 classes of seconde, which is the first year of high school. 19. And in each class, there's between 30 and 35 students.
Wow.
And you can imagine, you have some teachers that are going to have maybe half of those classes, and you have to remember who everybody is. And it's impossible. So it's I mean, where does the fault lie? I don't know, but that is the way that students are judged, by their school, by their grades.
By the comparison.
And they're compared, yeah. It's like, And so I don't know whether they have access to other people's grades. I know that they obviously have their own. I don't think they can see anybody else's grades unless they go and ask that person. So I think that is, the problem is structural. And I don't know, what can be done about that. I mean, it's just the way that it is. And what I was going to say as well, when you were speaking, I was remembering when I was at school. So I went to school in the first half of the 1980s. No, am I right? Yes, kind of. We did manual things at school. I did woodwork.
Yeah.
I mean, I've absolutely no use to me whatsoever, but I do remember doing woodwork. And I remember it was, you had to learn, you had a piece of wood and you had to put it in a vise and you had to, file the wood. And we used to make things. I did sewing at school. We did sewing. We did music. We played musical instruments. We did religion, which of course in France you're not allowed to do. And we did what's called home economics, which was all about cooking. And it was boys and girls.
Interesting.
We were taught how to plan a meal in terms of its nutritional content. So it was a bit cooking and science together. And we learned things that were practical, which don't exist nowadays because you can't measure somebody who's good at woodwork. You know, it's all you can. I can measure that you got 5 out of 10 for your maths. I can measure that you made 10 mistakes in your your written essay or whatever it is. It has to be. It's all measured. But these kind of subjects that are not really practically useful, they don't exist anymore. Not even in the UK where I did my school.
No, it doesn't.
No. But I remember them with great pleasure, actually. You know, and I think it's so sad that these things are just not done anymore. You know.
That is very sad.
Mm.
That is
Yeah.
very sad that we are moving toward this world of
You have to be measured. You know, it's everything about being
measurements.
measured. Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the
Yeah.
in this world that we are living in, everything is with measurements.
It's measured. Yeah, you're measured
Everything.
against somebody else.
Yeah,
You know, he's better
always.
than you. He's worse than me.
Always.
And it's the same in it's not just in high school. It's the same in university education as well. You have to you're measured. You know, you have your average or and everything is measured, and that is what causes a lot of stress to people because I've got to increase my average and yeah.
Do we? How much time we have? 14 minutes. Okay.
14.
Okay. I think it's a time to wrap it up. Thank you very much. That was a really great conversation, and
pleasure.
I hope to see you soon.
Mhm.
And thank you guys for watching. I don't know which. Okay. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Paul. All right.
Thank you.